Why do so many Christian men struggle with pornography addiction? I think it's fair to say that if you look across the church in general, porn addiction, porn consumption, and the infidelity that comes out of porn addiction is one of the biggest issues facing our modern church and the men of the church. The statistics are shocking when you look at the amount of men that are regular attendees of church, when you look at the pastors, the youth pastors, and just the impact that pornography addiction is having on congregations and ministries all across America. Barna research points to 77% of Christian men watch pornography on a regular basis. That same research study tells us that 56% of pastors are using or struggling with this behavior, and upwards of 64% of youth pastors are caught up in struggling with this issue. Now, if you ask me, I think that number 77% is close. It may be a little low. I would say the number is probably closer to 80, 85%. 56% of pastors, 64% of youth pastors. That number is shocking. And when asked, the vast majority of pastors and ministry leaders will point to pornography consumption, pornography addiction, or like I said, the infidelity that comes out of this behavior as one of the biggest issues facing their congregation. Pornography is a thorn in the side of the church. It is literally ripping marriages apart. It is crippling men. It is keeping young men from finding their purpose, from finding meaning in their life. But why is that the case? Is this issue something that is solely isolated to the church? Is this an issue that only Christian men of faith, men of God, struggle with? Well, we know that answer is no. Our work, Rebuilt Recovery, has worked with men from all walks of life, all worldviews. Yes, we attract a high majority of men of faith. I think my message resonates with the men out there that want more out of life, that are here for a bigger purpose, here for a bigger calling, and identify themselves as men of faith or men of God. But we've also worked with atheists. We've worked with agnostic individuals. We worked with Muslims. We worked with Buddhists. We've worked with men of all worldviews and all walks of life. But when I speak to Christian men, when I attend churches, when I have conversations with pastors from all across the country, this is one of the biggest issues that they're all facing. And I want to share a few of my thoughts and opinions on why this is the case. But remember, 70% of Christian men, and that number is probably higher, 56% of pastors and 64% of youth pastors. I recently had the opportunity to speak at a church here in Largo, Florida, just outside of Tampa Bay. And one of the questions that came at the end of the session from a youth pastor sitting in the audience was, how do you address this with your youth when parents aren't wanting to have the conversation had with their children? And I think the first thing we have to understand, and this is feeding the issue, is that there's still so much taboo nature around this conversation. If we're avoiding having the conversation at home, if we're avoiding having the conversation with others, it is going to make its way into our children. And research and evidence points us to early age exposure without help, support, and guidance leads to addictive and compulsive behaviors later on in life. So the issue is big now, but I don't see it changing if we don't change how we're approaching it. So the first thing is we have to be willing to have the conversation. Out of those 56% of pastors and 64% of youth pastors, that same research study tells us that only 7% of churches have a course, have a program, have a group dedicated to solving this issue within their church. So we know 80% of the men are struggling. More than 50% of the pastors are struggling. But less than 10% of the churches are taking a proactive steps towards fighting this issue. That's going to continue to feed the problem. But here's where I'll tell you, I think the vast majority of Christians have this wrong, the vast majority of believers. And I'm open to debate around this topic. I'm open to pushback. If you guys do not agree with me on this, please let me know. But one of the biggest struggles and challenges I see with men of faith in the church in general, is they lump pornography addiction into the conversation with sexual sin, with sexual misconduct, and sexual addiction. And as somebody that's sat on this side of the chair now, has been free for 5 years himself, has helped hundreds of other men walk the path to them freedom for themselves, and has spoken with thousands of individuals, I have a strong opinion that in most cases, pornography addiction has nothing to do with our sexual conduct. Pornography addiction is different than sex addiction. Pornography addiction, oftentimes, if you ask me, is not sexual sin. It is sin against your body. It is sin against other people. But to lump it in the same conversation as sexual misconduct, I believe holds more men shackled to the behavior than anything else. And this is probably why non-believers, those that don't subscribe to a Christian belief system and worldview, yet they still struggle, don't struggle at the same magnitude. Because they can separate the two. They can say, I can have my sex life over here. But this behavior with pornography is rooted in lack of self-regulation, the inability to control thoughts, the inability to control and regulate my nervous system. Most men start consuming pornography before they even know what sex is. Most men start consuming pornography, and most of today's young men are addicted to pornography before ever having their first sexual experience. So in my opinion, porn addiction is not a sex addiction in most cases. Now, yes, I've had many clients that the two are interlinked, the two are intertwined. And those are the cases for some men out there. But we're speaking in generalities here. We're speaking in general terms. And I think if more men in the church would see this through this different lens, you know, I'm in conversations with the church right now about building out a curriculum for their men. And I had this conversation with one of the head pastors leading that project. And he was kind of taken back. I don't think he actually saw it the same way that I do. And he was telling me that he's thinking about putting the men that are struggling with pornography addiction through a sexual ethics course. I don't think that's going to do anything for a man that is struggling with controlling his nervous system and uses porn as an outlet for stress, anxiety, fear, etc., etc. When you're stressed, the first thing you think about isn't about having sex. It's about relieving yourself through pornography. You watch porn when you're alone, when you're isolated, not situations or environments that you're thinking about having sex. So I think one of the biggest things here, men, is we have to begin to separate this conversation. Gambling addiction, video game addiction, marijuana, alcohol. These are other addictions that have nothing to do with our sexual nature. Now, can porn addiction have negative impacts on your sexual desires? Can it have negative impacts on your sexual performance? 100%. Because you're using parts of your body and of your being that God created for sex, but you're using them in a non-sexual way. Now, yes, you're watching people have sex on a screen. I get that as well. But the behavior in and of itself, what it is we're looking to accomplish with the use of pornography, has to be understood from a base physiological level. And I think if more of us could see it through this lens, more men would remove the guilt and shame of sexual impurity, of sexual misconduct. That keeps more men wrapped up in guilt and shame and avoiding having the real necessary conversation. And that's got to start there. We have to look at it differently, but then we have to take proactive steps. Get in the Word, pray, seek community, all important parts of it. But we need an actual process to walk us through to become the man that no longer struggles with this behavior in our life. And that's what we've done is we put together free training for you guys. It's called the 12 Steps to Becoming a Porn-Free Man. If you visit rebuildsrecovery.com/12 steps or click the link down there in the show notes or in the description box below, it's going to give you free access to the training immediately. But this is our entire blueprint. This is what I've spent the last 4.5 years in developing and tweaking and refining and perfecting. And it's this framework, this protocol that has helped close to 900 men now create lasting freedom in their life from pornography addiction, not from sex addiction, because I think they're different. Rebuiltrecovery.com/12 steps. Guys, check out the free training. If you're getting value out of these YouTube videos, subscribe so you do not miss an upcoming video. If you're listening on the audio side, guys, make sure to leave us a rating and 5-star review. But Coach Frank here at the Rebuild Man Podcast. We love you guys. We'll see you in the next one.